Syphilis, an invisible enemy that has destroyed bodies and minds for centuries, regardless of crowns. It crept through the darkness of royal bedrooms, leaving behind ulcers, madness, and death. It was silent in official chronicles, but whispered by courtiers and doctors. Even the most powerful monarchs could not escape its slow curse. In this video, we look at 5 royal figures whose glory faded under the shadow of a terrible disease. Henry VIII. He was feared, his women disappeared, and his body slowly rotted from the inside. Henry VIII is the legendary king of England, who broke ties with the Pope, executed 2 of his wives, and created his own church. But behind the scenes of glory is a body disfigured by the disease and a mind that slowly faded. The diagnosis is syphilis. It would seem that the monarch, in the guise of a warrior, a brilliant hunter and a lover, could not be sick. But the facts indicate otherwise. After 40 years, Henry is rapidly gaining weight. His weight exceeds 150 kilograms. On his legs, rotting ulcers that do not heal. Walking is painful. Sitting is unbearable. His character is like a blast wave, from jokes to fury in seconds. His first wife, Catherine of Aragon, could not give birth to a son. His friend, Anne Boleyn, died on the scaffold. Syphilis is not just a disease of debauchery. In the 16th century, it was a sentence. And Henry, known for his numerous mistresses, could have been infected in his youth. The treatment of that time, mercury ointments, rubbing and steam treatment chambers, only accelerated the destruction. Some documents mention that the king was treated with mercury, and this is direct evidence that syphilis was considered one of the causes of his condition. Another fact is his frightening mood, constant suspicions, attacks of aggression, persecution of courtiers. These are all signs of tertiary syphilis, which affects the brain. But the most terrible thing is the death of the king. In 1547, Henry's body was so deformed that the coffin could not stand it. During the funeral, it swelled and leaked, and the liquid from the rotting body began to flow right into the chapel. Syphilis turned the king into a monster. Ivan IV the Terrible. His name became synonymous with cruelty. He killed his own son, tortured the boyars, and founded the Oprichnina, the first state terror system in Russia. Ivan IV the Terrible was a czar who was feared even by his own shadow. But behind the image of a ruthless ruler, a disease was hidden that was eating him from the inside. A disease that was not spoken about out loud, syphilis. With age, his paranoia grew to the limit. The czar closed himself in on himself, arranged interrogations, killed entire families, and then prayed on his knees crying. Some considered it madness. Syphilis in the 16th century was a plague for Europe and quickly reached Muscovy. It was transmitted sexually, affected the blood vessels, skin, and in the tertiary stage, the brain. According to foreign ambassadors, Ivan had a promiscuous intimate life, often changing women and sometimes ordering girls from the people to be given to him. His screams at night, unexpected attacks of pain, and mood swings became regular. In the later years of his life, the Tsar's face changed. He became almost bald with distorted features. His skin was pale, with ulcers, and his teeth were falling out. The documents mention that his body had a terrible smell of rot. But the most alarming thing was his mental state. Ivan the Terrible signed death sentences by the hundreds, arranged torture in his own presence, and then wrote letters of repentance. He beat his wives, fled to monasteries, and later returned to Moscow with a new wave of terror. These were typical symptoms of syphilitic psychosis, paranoia, violence, depression, hallucinations. The most terrible moment came in 1581. In a fit of rage, Ivan hit his son, the heir, on the head with a metal rod. He died a few days later. The king sobbed, banging his head on the floor, but the heir was gone, and with him, a stable future for the state. Ivan died in 1584, exhausted, physically deformed, in terrible pain. According to one version, his body was covered with ulcers and abscesses, and his brain was already destroyed by infection. Charles II Stewart. He was called the Merry Monarch, Charles II Stewart returned entertainment, theater, palaces, and frank enjoyment of life to England. After the strict Puritan dictatorship of Cromwell, he became the personification of freedom. But behind the brilliance of his court was a dirty, painful, corrosive secret. Charles had it all: power, mistresses, wine, fame, and syphilis. During his life, he had more than 10 official favorites. He recognized at least 12 illegitimate children. But with his wife, the Portuguese Princess Catherine of Braganza, no children. Could it be that Charles was actually infected with a disease that kills slowly? Syphilis strikes insidiously. At first, ulcers in the intimate area, which often disappear by themselves, and a person thinks that everything is over. After, hair loss, joint pain, fever, weakness. In the tertiary stage, damage to the brain, heart, liver, psychosis, hallucinations, personality degradation. And now, let's take a closer look at the last years of Charles II. His courtiers describe how he complained of pain in his legs, itching, fatigue, strange rashes on the skin. Some letters mention spots on his back and chest that appeared and disappeared. These are classic secondary symptoms of syphilis. Later, attacks of headache, impaired coordination, loss of appetite, dizziness, and even seizures began. This could already be damage to the central nervous system, a condition that we know today as neurosyphilis. Charles died at the age of 54, officially from a stroke. But after all the symptoms that haunted him, after all the procedures and secrets, it's hard not to ask the question: did he fall victim to syphilis? Later, at the autopsy, it was mentioned that the organs were weak, exhausted, and the contents of the liver and skin had an unusual color and odor. Ernst August I, Queen Victoria, was the mother of an empire that spanned half the world. But what if behind her cold determination was a dark legacy, a father who was eaten away by syphilis? His name was Ernst August I, Duke of Cumberland, later King of Hanover. And although history is silent about him in textbooks, in the highest courts of Europe he had a reputation: terrible, ruthless, aggressive, lustful, and paranoid. And worst of all, he was a carrier of syphilis, a disease that destroyed everything, from body to mind. As a young man, he served in the British Army, but he was remembered not for valor, but for debauched evenings, scandals, and numerous affairs. After returning to England, his name appears in stories that would be better forgotten: attempted rape of a maid, alleged involvement in the murder of his servant, secret confessions of strange nocturnal rituals. But the main thing is evidence of physical degradation, which began in him long before old age. Eyewitnesses described him as a pale, exhausted man, with an unpleasant body odor, periodic rashes, and sharp mood swings. This is the classic clinical picture of secondary and tertiary syphilis. The patient becomes paranoid, prone to violence, and falls into religious or mystical delusions. The court letters mention that Ernst August stayed up at night, wiped his body with pigeon blood for purification, talked to himself, and hid mirrors. Such actions were similar to syphilitic hallucinations, which appear when the disease reaches the brain. His body lost mobility. Ulcers appeared that smelled of arsenic and rot, according to the doctor's descriptions. He had heart disorders, hair loss, visual hallucinations. When Ernst August died in 1851, Europe sighed with relief. They said little about him and remembered with fear. Don Carlos. In the 16th century, Spain was at the height of its power. On the throne sat Philip II, a king who ruled an empire over which the sun never set. But in the heart of his court, in the Escorial Palace, a son was growing up who would continue the glory of the Habsburg dynasty. His name was Don Carlos, and his life was a horror to all who knew him. From childhood, Carlos was weak, strange, and unbalanced. His body was deformed, one shoulder higher than the other, his gait was crooked, and his head was too large and disproportionate. But the scariest thing was not in his body, but in his mind. He tortured animals, threatened to kill his father, tortured servants, and once, he personally threw a servant down the stairs for looking at him the wrong way. The Spanish court whispered Carlos was crazy. But there were those who believed the reason was not only in genes. And here is the most terrifying hypothesis. Some historians suspect that Don Carlos may have suffered from congenital syphilis. His mother, Maria of Portugal, died shortly after his birth, and Philip II may have contracted the disease from other partners. The symptoms of congenital syphilis, a deformed body, neurological disorders, blindness, skin ulcers, madness, match Carlos's descriptions perfectly. In 1568, Philip II ordered his own son imprisoned, in a room without mirrors, without reflection, without hope. 6 months later, Don Carlos died. He was only 23. The official cause was natural death, but no one believed him, because the young prince's body slowly decayed, as if struck by an invisible disease. This is the story of an heir who was destroyed by the secrets of his own blood, and a disease that was only spoken of in whispers at the time. History is silent, but the facts